I also host the Lsat Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. I've been teaching the Lsat for just about 15 years now and started back in my own Lsat journey. I started off at a 152, which I was not happy with on my diagnostic. I'd gone to an Ivy League undergrad. I thought I was going to go to a top 14 law school, and that diagnostic of a 152 really killed me, honestly. That was not what I was expecting, not what I was hoping for. And it was just the beginning of a very long journey seeking to master this exam. I did every single Lsat exam I could find, read every single Lsat book I could find, and I hammered away at this exam relentlessly over the course of an entire year until I was able to very gradually bring my score up to a 175. And after that, I actually ended up never going to law school. I got really obsessed with this exam, sought to dissect it from every angle. I taught friends the process of how to master this exam, and I've been teaching it ever since. I started off by creating the Lsat Blog, where I have over 1,000 articles on every aspect of Lsat preparation, focused primarily on self-study for the Lsat, so that you don't need to buy one of those $1,000+ Lsat courses. I have a variety of low-cost self-study materials, guides, cheat sheets, checklists, explanations, and full video courses for every section of the exam. Next slide, Joel. I also have since transitioned to YouTube and podcasting because I've discovered that all young people don't like to read anymore. So I've got YouTube videos I'm putting out every day on the YouTube channel. I also have a daily podcast and a weekly podcast featuring short episodes, long episodes, recordings of classes like this, live coaching sessions with real Lsat students, interviews with current and former admission officers, and much, much more than that. I also have a series of full video courses, including foundational material on every aspect of the exam, as well as live online classes that you can attend, as well as Q&A sessions like this one, but I go into deeper, more advanced material as well. And my students have scored in the 160s and 170s and beyond. I've gotten them 10 to 20 point score increases, but you don't have to believe me or take my word for it. Their stories are actually featured in Lsat diaries on my website, the Lsat Blog. If you just Google it, you'll find their stories, and you can also see many of their stories on the YouTube channel and podcast as well. So my thought for tonight is to go over a bit of the Digital Lsat transition and changes happening this year, as well as some other recent Lsat policy changes. I'm not going to do a detailed walkthrough of the Digital Lsat because I've already done that elsewhere. You can see it on my YouTube channel and on LSAC's website at familiar.lsac.org. But I do want to talk through a little bit about what the features of the Digital Lsat are and how you need to adjust your preparation accordingly, because most of you probably are studying out of Lsat prep test books, the ones on Amazon, the ones in the bookstore, and those are no longer as relevant as they used to be, of course. The Lsat has gone digital in North America, starting with the September Lsat in just a couple of weeks now. The July Lsat was the transitional exam. Half of students were given the digital format, half were given the paper and pencil format. But going forward, starting in September in North America and beyond, it's going to be 100% digital. It will be administered on a tablet, specifically a Microsoft Surface Go 10-inch tablet. So the question that arises, do you need to get a tablet? Do you need to study on a tablet? The answer is yes and no. You don't need to go out and buy a tablet, and you certainly don't need the exact tablet that LSAC will be using, which again is a Microsoft Surface Go. Any old tablet would be perfectly fine. A Samsung, an iPad, an Amazon Fire HD10, which is about $150. So not a crazy investment. I do recommend getting one if you can, or at least borrowing one or buying it and then returning it later if you decide that it's not for you. But it is worth seeing what the format will be like for you on test day. $150 is a drop in the bucket. If it got you even a single point more on the LSAT to have that increased familiarity and ease of use doing exam problems on the tablet, it's well worth it. Again, familiar.lsac.org. There are currently 3 exams in the digital format where you can play around with them on LSAC's site using your tablet. A smartphone doesn't really do the job well. You could look at it on a desktop as well, but you're not going to have the interactivity with the touch screen or using a stylus. On the Digital Lsat, you cannot draw freehand on the tablet the way you can on a piece of paper or on a whiteboard, which is kind of funny because I would think that's the whole point of a tablet, but it is what it is. You can use certain annotation features though. You can highlight, you can underline, you can increase and decrease the text size, you can flag questions, you can eliminate answer choices. So there are some cool features. It's not all good and bad, but I do mainly want to call your attention to the fact that you cannot draw on the questions themselves or in the empty white space on the screen. Instead, you want to use scratch paper to the side. They're giving you a booklet of about 12 to 14 pages, 8.5 by 11 paper, unlined, that thin, cheap newsprint you're used to. That's what your scratch paper is going to be like. So if you want to treat your books like a screen and keep your scratch paper to the side, that could be a good way to adjust for this. Another thing with the digital LSAT transition is the writing sample. The writing sample is no longer at the test center on test day, and you're not writing on lined paper by hand. Instead, you are using the computer later, maybe a week later, maybe a month later. You have up to 1 year after your LSAT administration to do the writing sample on your computer from the comfort of wherever you can bring your laptop. They will watch you with a microphone and webcam to make sure it's really you doing it for security purposes, but you're not doing it at the test center on that day itself, which is kind of nice in a way, because that way you're going to be fresh when you actually choose to do the writing sample on your own time. Maybe that means admission officers will be a little bit more likely to look at the results of this. And Joel, you could speak to that a bit more later if you want, but it's going to be typed on your own time, 35-minute time constraint, and it's a separate thing, still unscored. So I wouldn't take it as seriously as the scored portions of the LSAT though, but I would still give it a little bit of extra weight for that reason. Now, cancellations and retakes. Cancellations and retakes have become more common than ever before because law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest score. This is a change going back to 2006, but there's still a lot of outdated information out there online about this. Law schools only consider the highest score because that's all they have to report to the American Bar Association, who in turn reports it to the US News rankings. So retaking is always worth it if you think you can do better and you haven't taken it a crazy number of times up to this point. There is a new LSAT retake limit LSAT has implemented in just a few months ago. I think they announced this change. You can only take it 3 times in one cycle, 5 times in a 5-year period, and 7 times over the course of your life, which really is honestly more than enough unless you get crazy obsessed with this exam like I did. But most people are not going to need to take it more than 3 times in a cycle anyway. And so with the LSAT being offered more frequently than ever before, let's say you have the September, October, and November test dates all before you. If you're taking even one of those, it might be worth taking it another time as well, because the test dates are only spaced apart 4 to 5 weeks. And so all you've got to do is stay fresh on the exam for another 4 to 5 weeks, maybe do another timed exam a week, along with detailed review of that exam. And that alone might get you a couple more points. It's kind of funny, but there's actually a score band of 3.5 points on either end. So one day you might get a 160 if that's your true aptitude. Another day you get a 163 or 164. Another day you get a 157, and the LSAT is still a perfectly valid exam. But since they only take the highest, if you can retake and get lucky, plus studying a bit more and improve your understanding a bit more, it could be well worth it. Canceling your score is not usually a great idea because they don't average the scores. But if you know for a fact that something went horribly wrong, it might be worth considering that just to avoid having an embarrassingly low score on your record, but it's not worth stressing about. Instead, if you're not feeling ready the day of or the day before, you might consider withdrawing instead, which will not appear on your record. If you withdraw the day before or even a week before or postpone your test date, law schools will never even know that you were registered for this exam. Now, in terms of strategies for the fall, the September LSAT is only a few weeks away. So at this point, I would suggest simply focusing on full-length timed exams, max 1 or 2 per week, because I don't want you to burn out, along with extremely detailed review of those exams. If you're taking it in October or November or beyond, then I'd recommend a more comprehensive full-length study process where you focus on what I call the LASER approach to LSAT self-study. LASER approach. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. 5 steps. Learning is theory, doing the work untimed, just looking at the foundational material, looking at textbooks or video lessons that kind of explain the basics to you. Then you have accuracy, doing untimed work, doing questions by type. Then you have sections, which are individual 35-minute timed sections. Then you have exams, which are full-length 5-section exams to practice your endurance. Then you have your review process, where you're looking at where your misunderstanding stemmed from. Was it in the stimulus for logical reasoning? Was it in the question stem, or was it in the choices? And you want to articulate this for yourself. Write it out, talk it out with a friend, make sure you really understand where your mistakes are coming from so that you can avoid making them in the future. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about GPA and LSAT score cutoffs. Are there truly hard and fast score cutoffs? Not exactly. As Joel said, it is a more holistic review process. But Harvard and Yale are probably not spending a whole lot of time looking at people with scores in the 140s. At a certain point, the numbers do matter. The numbers do act as a filter in some way, just because they do have so many applications to look at. One thing you can do is simply Google Lsat Gpa Calculator, and LSAC has a calculator where you can input your GPA from undergrad as well as a given LSAT score, and you'll see how you stack up compared to accepted students at those various schools. You'll see the 25th percentiles and 75th percentiles for a given school, so you can see whether you are realistically in this range. You also want to consider that these calculators don't let you input if you are, for example, an underrepresented minority, or if you are a legacy, or if you clerked for a judge or something, or have some impressive work experience to offer. They're not considering all of those factors, so you have to kind of adjust them a little bit for yourself, take them a little bit with a grain of salt. But I can say, of course, that your GPA is probably fairly fixed in stone at this point, and your LSAT score is the single biggest thing you could do at this point in the process to change your admissions chances. And so it is well worth spending at least 5 to 6 months to truly master this exam. It doesn't have to take you a full year like it did for me, but it's also well worth spending more than simply a month or 2 or 3 to learn this exam. It does take 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential in this. It is a far more difficult exam than it might appear at first glance.